we're hearing today, there's a lot of companies who are kind of working on conversational AI solutions that are doing it for the very first time, never built anything before, and are having to lean on providers and vendors for support and things like that. And then what happens is they develop, they mature, they start taking more things in-house, and they end up kind of scaling out. We've seen there, you scratch the surface of what this can do, and all of a sudden, the kind of floodgates open, and you realize that this technology can be used absolutely everywhere. So we want to kind of share a little bit about what that journey looks like as you go from beginning to kind of maturing. And we've put together this maturity scale, essentially. It's a combination of a bunch of different maturity scales across digital transformation and all these kind of things. And I'm going to kind of step through it and show you a little bit about what it looks like to go from nothing to where I think there isn't many yet, but where we're kind of heading, essentially. And so wherever you are on this scale, hopefully there's a little bit of insight into the kind of things that you can do next to develop more effective solutions and to organize yourselves more effectively internally as well. So the first stage is the kind of, I call it the incubate kind of phase, which is where you haven't done anything yet. Daniela, you were sharing a little bit there about, you've got a situation, there is a current service being delivered that is maybe subpar compared to what people expect today, and you think that there is value in conversational AI or value in automating it to some degree. So that beginning process where you're starting to kind of get your feet under the table as far as what can this technology do, and you're doing your research, is the kind of incubation phase. We ran a series of workshops with the team at Cognigy recently. We had about 50 businesses turn up to these 2 workshops, and we were asking, what are the challenges that you face when trying to adopt conversational AI? And this is a breakdown of those challenges. The vast majority of them related to leadership support, leadership knowledge, leadership vision, and all of this kind of strategic kind of alignment stuff that's required in order to get this stuff adopted at a broader level than a narrow kind of use case. Lots of it was around team and resources, team skills, understanding, conversation design, conversational AI, NLP skills and knowledge. And lots of it was about the technology and data, particularly data, because to build these assistants effectively, you need to be able to generate some data and use the data that you have to build them effectively. And so these all kind of broken down. These are all kind of like underneath the second row here. This is kind of like all of the various challenges that were listed across each main parent. I'm not going to go into them all, but essentially every one leads to another. So for example, if your leadership doesn't have any education whatsoever about conversational AI, the value it can bring, how it can be used realistically, what's feasible, how to go about doing it, how to weave it into your strategy, make it a core part of your strategy. If there's no education in CD leadership, then inevitably they can't really put a vision together of what this business should look like in 5 years' time, using conversational AI as a core kind of enabler of that transformation. They therefore can't assign priority to it. They therefore can't dedicate ownership to it. That person or people who own it can't then go around and get support from the wider business. Without support from the wider business, there's no decision making that gets done. There's no strategy that gets formed, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And it's all like a cascading effect, essentially. So the big learning that we got out of that workshop and those series of workshops, which I think has been reflected as well here, is the importance of educating senior leadership as to the value of conversational AI, helping them understand what's feasible, helping them understand what the kind of path is. Because you've got a lot of teams now that are kind of, start at grassroots, and let's say in a contact center there's a team that just kind of develop a point solution here, and then they hit a brick wall, because really there's loads of opportunity in marketing, but the people that run marketing don't have a clue about this technology and how to use it and how it can be effective. There might be loads of opportunity internally, as we've kind of discussed with HR, IT, procurement, all that kind of stuff. And so the grassroots kind of approach gets you so far, but really, if we're talking about wider transformative conversational solutions, it all kind of begins with educating leadership. So when you're in the incubation phase, it's all about education and kind of researching and educating yourself. Then you move into this crawl phase, and most organizations will go through this, which is the kind of proof of concept, proof of technology. That's exactly what Daniela had mentioned. When you get to that kind of like vendor selection point, you want to prove the technology, prove it can do what it says on the tin, prove it has the potential to deliver business value. And in that phase, Often, and I'm glad to say that this isn't always the case, but often when people start, they work on these kind of deflecting use cases. I think Frank Schneider even mentioned it this morning that, 5 years ago it was all about deflecting, and now we're getting more into transacting. But from a practical standpoint, if you're just getting started and you're doing this yourself, these deflecting use cases tend to be easier to do because you're not integrating into back office systems, you're not doing a whole load of complex service design, you're kind of just using the technology on the front end to answer questions and almost like, signpost people to the right place. Not always incredibly useful, tends to piss quite a lot of people off because they often might not do exactly what they say on the tin, but that's kind of where people start. So this scale here as we go through this is all around the maturity of the front end solution essentially. And so you might start with deflecting use cases. And then at that proof of concept stage or kind of like, the kind of early sort of MVP sort of stage, there's a decision to be made about whether you buy or build as far as your kind of implementation strategy is concerned. You may get to this stage before that proof of concept. Some teams are quite comfortable, kind of like rolling their sleeves up and hacking away and building a prototype, and then they can prove that there's an opportunity here. Then they will go and decide how to do it properly and take it to production. Others will just go straight to this and say, okay, how are we going to do this, and go straight to this build versus buy. The 6 ways to do it, essentially. I won't go through them all in incredible detail, but broadly speaking, you can build something from scratch, which is building everything from the ground up. All of your own machine learning models, all of your own NLP engines, your own speech recognition, your own natural language understanding, etc., etc., etc. There is very few organizations that do this because a lot of that stuff has already been done, although it does happen. Deutsche Telekom, for example, built their entire solution from scratch, including speech recognition, including natural language understanding, including dialogue management, absolutely everything, because they weren't happy with a third-party provider processing their data, essentially. I think BMW have done something similar, but it doesn't happen very often. The next approach is to use components. So that's using things like speech recognition from DeepGram or Google or whoever it might be, using natural language understanding elements from Microsoft and Amazon or whoever, and then text to speech and other components from other organizations that develop those specific components. The value of that obviously is that, for example, DeepGram do nothing but speech recognition. Chances are they're going to have their shit together and they're going to build it pretty well, rather than if you've got one team and trying to build all this stuff yourself, you kind of spread yourself too thinly. So most organizations that say that they're building something from scratch are actually using this component approach. They're just stitching together components from other providers. You've got the platform approach, which is the route that Florida Blue took. And that platform is where you bring in a third-party platform, that you get the tools, and you can build on top of it yourself. You may lean on the provider in the short term to get you up to speed, but ultimately the platform strategy is one where you will be building your own solutions yourself in future. I've kind of put that in the middle of build versus buy because you're buying in the technology, but then you're building on top of it. The other solution is to acquire, which plenty of companies have done in the past. Apple acquired Voices and Pullstring, and Snapchat acquired Voca AI. So Walmart acquired Botmock. So it's a case of just finding a solution in the market, buying it, and again I've put it in the middle of build versus buy because you can acquire it, which is you're buying it, but then once you've got the team and you've got the technology going forward, you are then building because you're building in the technology. You can buy off the shelf, which is a kind of like out of the box, for want of a better word, assistant. Raj mentioned the IT assistant and the HR assistant, pre-configured domain-specific language models that essentially you kind of just plug and play. Maybe you want to tweak the conversation, do your own integrations, but 90% of the work is done. And then a managed service. We heard from Poly AI earlier on around the Landrys, and for Landrys, conversational AI is not what they do. They're a hotel, they take bookings, they're a casino, they allow people to hopefully win a fortune. And so it's not really their core business. And if it's not your core business, then there's other companies that can do this far better than you, far quicker, far more cost effective. Outsource it, and it's as simple as that. And so I'm not going to go too much detail into this, but there was a 45-page report basically diving into each one of those different areas and assessing the strengths and weaknesses and helping you at the end as a framework basically, which will kind of plot all of this on a very simple matrix, and you can just use your own use cases that you have and figure out kind of the best approach for you. And there's 7 kind of key considerations when planning this conversational AI approach. And each of those different approaches have different kind of strengths and weaknesses. So feel free to check that out. It's literally, it's 45 pages worth of stuff. And I can think, if you get to the end of that guide and you can't decide whether to buy or build, then you will need to call me because there's something missing. Cool, there's another one there, VUX.la/BB if you want to do that. So then, once you get past that stage, you get into a kind of live stage. You go live for the first time. And then it's where you very first start to learn about things like your AI operations, understanding how to take data that customers are saying to your assistant and using that to improve and develop your language model, learn new use cases and prioritize those kind of things, understand how to use analytics. And then you start talking about scale. It's exactly what we've just heard from Daniela. One use case, live, working incredibly well, and all of a sudden it's like floodgates open. We can use this for IT, we can use this across all of our business units, we can use this across all of our use cases, all of our channels. Let's do chat, let's do WhatsApp, let's do Apple Business Chat, and all of a sudden you get the ideas flowing and you'll think about scaling. So in order to scale, there's essentially 4 main kind of components as far as I can see. You need to have the people, processes and tools in place to get started in the first place. This is a very common model, the golden triangle. You've probably seen this a number of times before. The right people, skilled with the knowledge, following the right processes and with the right kind of tools. And after that, really, you want to look at 3 other things. So coverage, how much of the conversations or how much of the things that your business does are able to be done via a conversation. Every single thing your business does, arguably can either be boiled down to a conversation or, in the case of Florida Blue, assisted by conversational AI in that visual IVR example, I believe anyway. So you want to get coverage across all of your use cases. Then you want to make those use cases available in as many possible channels as you can. So if you've got it working in your contact center in your IVR now, you want to be thinking about how do you get it onto your website and turn it into a chat situation? How do you take that chat and get that into WhatsApp or Apple Business Chat or Google My Business or Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, etc., 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 etc. There's so many conversational channels now, and the aim is to get this assistant in the places where your customers already are. And then that leads to adoption. So once you get adoption, you're then back around again. You need to invest further in your processes, your people and your tools, because you need to scale further, invest in more use cases, invest in more channels, rise your adoption, and so on and so on and so on. There's other ways that you can get adoption, So for example, if you have a chatbot, you don't have to be, pop that little kind of pop-up that pops up all the time. That's like one little tactic to try and get people to use it a bit more. But the main thing that gets adoption, I've found, is actually just making something the default way of doing it. The reason why none of us get paper bills anymore is because our telecom providers decided that it's going to be more cost efficient for them and probably better for us, because all we do is throw it in a bin anyway, just to default the paperless billing process. So now when you sign up, you renew your contract, you take out a new utility provider, you never get paperless bills because it's a default behavior that you just get it via email or you get it on your online account. So how do you make conversational AI default? Well, the IVR is a perfect place to start. When someone calls, if it's a voice assistant that answers, they're not going to say, oh no, I'm not going to talk to that and put the phone down. 9 times out of 10, they'll give it a go. They might want to speak to an agent, and that's fine, but they'll at least give it a go. So you've got adoption baked in. And so that's kind of like the keys to scale, I think. Then you'll get into this phase where you're in a kind of running phase, is what I call it, and that's where you're probably live with more than one use case. You might be live in more than one channel. And you're building a center of excellence. You've proven now that this is something that you're going to take seriously, it's something that you are going to scale, and you're going to build a team to support it properly. So a team that is going to be able to take something from idea through to completion without any assistance from any outside support or anything like that. You may, ideally at this point, you need to become data driven if you're not already, and so obviously Greg's sitting down there from Human First. Ideal tool to be looking at this kind of stuff. Taking data from all of your different channels, whether that's email, whether that's live chat, whether that's your contact center, all of the different places where you can get your data, feeding that in, analyzing it, and then working out what is it that we need to be doing next. That's what you kind of will be getting into if you're in that kind of run sort of phase. And in that phase, you'll be working on slightly more advanced use cases from the front end. So you might be using things that are there to interpret. So you might be using conversational intelligence, trying to do like topic clustering and figure out what people are calling for. You might be using it for call routing. So when someone calls and they say, I want to speak to, returns, you can use that intent, understand what that customer is intending to do and get them to the right kind of place. Or you may be into working on transactional use cases at that point, core business processes. Most of the time these transactional use cases are based on a front end to a business process that already exists quite often. And so I'll come on to more about that in a moment. Then the relay phase is where you start to democratize the creation and the management and the deployment to line of business units. There's some organizations that are beginning to do this now. Eon, one, Cognigy customer, I believe, in Europe, they've done this kind of thing. They've federated access from their core team down to kind of individual lines of business. And all of their kind of bots that they're creating have kind of got this one overarching assistant over the top of it that is there to take the request from the user, figure out which bot is best at answering it, and then serve up that off the back of it. And so in this phase, that core center of excellence become more like an enablement team. So they're not there necessarily to always build and implement. They're there to guide and help the other teams do this stuff properly. And in order to do that, you need to have standards. You need to have an understanding of what is a good conversation. How do we measure a good conversation? How do we have quality control in place to make sure that everything that goes live is actually going to be meeting the kind of standard that we have? You'll probably have an owner for things like natural language understanding. You might have an owner for individual intents. To make sure that your language models are always clean. And you'll be working on more sophisticated use cases around assistants that genuinely do assist. And I've called this one here an informed consultant, because at this phase, you tend to be using data that you already have to be able to be proactive, okay? So, for example, if someone calls in, either using network authentication or using a phone number and co-referencing that with the CRM and, picking out what their last interaction with us was, and then using that to inform the premise of the conversation. So are you calling about that thing you just purchased last week or something like that? You're starting to assist people, you're starting to be proactive, and you may also be in more consulting in nature. So most of the time, kind of like transacting and deflecting, all you're doing is you're just picking up on what someone said and you're matching it to an intent, and that's the end of it. So, can I have a replacement credit card, please? Yes, you can. In the consulting phase, you might be helping customers that don't actually know what it is that they need. So this comes from Raz's scale, maturity scale. So for example, if someone says something like, I'm moving house and considering, my kids have moved out, I'm considering downsizing. That user might not necessarily know exactly what they want. They need the assistant to help them. It might be that they want to check mortgage rates. It might be that they want to pay off their mortgage. It might be that they want to find out how much they owe on their mortgage. It might be that they want to do an assessment to figure out what mortgage they can afford if they were to move or downsize. There's a whole bunch of things that might be useful to that person. It's the AI's assistant basically at that point to try and consult with them and guide them through it. And then this is what I call total fitness, and I don't think anybody's quite there yet, but it's kind of where we've been before with digital and with social and with the web and all this kind of stuff, which is that it just becomes what you do, right? Conversation first, AI first, it just becomes part of what you do on a daily basis. Nobody needs to kind of question the value of a website. Everybody in the organization knows what a website is, what it does. Most divisions in an organization have a presence on your website in some respects or way, shape or form, even if that's like an internal intranet or whatever. It's just a completely standard way of doing things. And so we'll get to a point where conversational AI and kind of business automation becomes business as usual. When you've got teams at different levels of the business working on this kind of stuff, and they're all trained in the process and they understand that they can take something from idea to production, you're now in a situation where that's just what they do. And we'll find that we'll see things that are more kind of more emergent. So for example, let's say that you have HR trying to book a Christmas party, and they want to try and find out who's available on what dates and what venue would be the best kind of venue. And at the moment, they probably send an email, get a form together maybe, have people complete it, or have people respond to the email. We'll get to a point where AI is business as usual, to the point where the person in HR will just fire up a bot for a specific use case, for a specific period of time. It'll go to everybody in the organization. They'll just talk to it, put their, answer a few questions, get their issue resolved. The bot will be used to decide where the Christmas party is going to be, how many people are going to attend, and what date it's going to be on, and what the venue will be, and all this kind of stuff. And then it'll just be scrapped and gone because it's not needed anymore. But having the ability to just fire up something, anybody to fire up something, use it for a specific use case, and then kind of get on with it, is when you're starting to think kind of AI first. And what that does is it means that there's more space for your core enablement team to be working on more transformational use cases. And the examples I like to give it here is it's the kind of things that help to redefine what your business actually does. Most of the time we use conversational AI as a front end to an existing business process. That's half of the challenge that most businesses go through, is that they try and plumb the conversational AI into existing business architecture, which is just not built for that purpose. And you have to follow a certain process. And in fact, sometimes you can't actually get the conversation that you need because the business process behind the scenes won't allow it. If you were instead to start with the conversation, Poly AI alluded to this earlier on, if you start with the conversation, design the perfect interaction that gets someone from the beginning of the conversation to the other, and then work backwards and says, okay, in order to deliver this conversation, what do we need our technology to be able to do? What do we need the process to be? And then redesign and reconfigure that in line. And that's exactly what happened with the booking use case with Landry's. It wasn't like, hey Landry's, tell us how you currently take bookings and we'll just shove a conversational AI on top of it. It was no. Let's go and design a conversation that gets people able to book hotel rooms consistently and effectively. Now let's figure out what we need to do with the business process to get there. And that's more on the transformative side. For example, there is no reason now why today a retailer couldn't send you a text message when they get a tag from their delivery company that your delivery is going to be late. Send you a text message, you get a text message, but your delivery is going to be late, I'm sorry. Anything else that can help you with in the meantime? If the customer says something like, yes, actually, can I swap my t-shirt from a medium to a large, having the ability to actually amend an order that's already been fulfilled and sent to a distributor or delivery company is something that no business process does today. It's gone, you've bought it now, see you later. But being able to do that and then also come back to the customer and say, actually, most people that have got this t-shirt also looked at these jeans, to say sorry about the fact that your delivery is going to be 2 days late, we'll give you 30% off these jeans if you want to. Yes, please, thank you, 32, short in my case. And then basically have that process fulfilled. That is a transformative use case. Because the company began with a text message that was delivering bad news, sorry, delivery is going to be late, turned it into a revenue generating opportunity, sold a new pair of jeans, and all of a sudden you've got a revenue generation model, completely automated, operating on its own. You can imagine having 1 million customers every single week that get that text message, even if 1% of them convert over the space of a year, you are transforming your business because you've got basically digital workers selling for you, And so that's kind of where we're going to get to. If you are interested in seeing where you sit on that scale, I saw a couple of people taking photographs. If you want to just know where you are on that scale, then there's an assessment, VUX.la/M, or scan that QR code. It's about 15 questions. Answer them, and at the end of it, it will basically tell you which point you're at, essentially, and then we'll email you afterwards with a few pointers about how you can get better. And so that's pretty much it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions, and other than that, if anyone does have any questions, anyone want any questions?
Can we get a copy of that deck?
Yes, you could do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't see why not. Absolutely. Anyone else? Yeah?
Have you been successful with your customers sharing their data, the before and after?
What kind of data?
On their voice bot. So they didn't have it before, they implemented something, and they've had great results. Will they share that with a peer?
Yeah.
Designing these things, you really have to build data to bring to me to say how the organization was impacted.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, the thing with this stuff is the technology, events like this, it's all about building a community. Right now, how many businesses use conversational AI? Compared to how many businesses exist in the world, there's absolutely nobody, right? Yet everyone's here we are. So what we're doing is we're building a community, we're educating people about how it's done and how it can be done successfully. And so you'll find that actually everybody more or less is willing to talk about what they do. We talk about what we do with clients, and you've seen today Core AI is sharing what they're doing with Florida Blue. We've got Cognigy talking later on about the work they're doing with Lufthansa. Earlier on, we had Poly AI with Landry's restaurants, and we had Verint talking about their kind of hotel chain. So you'll find actually that, yeah, people are generally up for sharing because it helps people learn. And if you've got a business that can utilize this technology, it's in everyone's interest to help you, enable you to do that, Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? No? Cool. I'll send Winston. I can't leave without showing you a picture of Winston. This is absolutely mandatory reading for, apparently, according to my wife Gemma. I had to put a picture of Winston in there. So anyway, let's do this trainer thing. If you do want these trainers, a version of these, doesn't have to be these Air Max 97s. If Air Max 97s is not your jam, we can do other things, Air Force Ones or something like that. If you do want to be in with a shout of winning a pair of these trainers, do tag or scan here, and it's literally like one form. It's not there for lead capture, it's there to be able to actually get in touch with you to find out where we're going to send these things to, and it'll be used for nothing else other than that. So if you are interested, please do scan that. And yeah, we'll see you back here at 3 o'clock, 50 minutes for the draw. And hopefully someone will win a nice pair of trainers. Yeah, can't say fairer than that. Thank you. See you soon.